Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Reinsurance Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jared Lee.
And I'm Ben Rose, and I'm not alone.
We're not.
No, we've got a special guest with us this week. Welcome, Jeremy Burgess, co-founder of the Insurance Network.
Well, delighted to be here, lads. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah,
Not your first time on the air. You are also the host of Burgess and Bolton.
I am. I'm co-host. Myself and Ben Bolton do a weekly kind of more of a web show. So we do it over LinkedIn, and a bit like you, it's kind of a little bit loose and kind of funny. Poking a bit of fun at the industry, getting on the light side of things. But we do a bit of that as well. So that's every Friday at noon. So that's good fun.
It was one of my favorites during the pandemic lockdown when Ben was on there and first getting into the space. So appreciate what the work you guys do there as well.
I know we talked about it, but we talked about it for a long time, and then the pandemic came along. We just said, "Look, let's just do it."
Yeah.
And we've just carried on doing it since. I mean, we have a mass audience of about 5. That's the beauty of these things, isn't it?
That's a lot of fun. But we did want to dive into the Insurance Network, your work with TINTech as an event, and all things technology and insurance, and everyone's favorite passion, which is this combination for us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so we started the Insurance Network. Oh God. 20 years ago, something like that. And even at that point, we had some kind of core, we used to call them golden rules around kind of the events that we were going to put on. And this is really because we were kind of sick and tired of putting on events as professional events organizers and them not really living up to expectations, both in terms of delegates and sponsors. So we set up the Insurance Network, and the core purpose really was to get the right people into the room. And by the right people, we meant senior practitioners from insurers and brokers to come in and talk about the strategic challenges that are impacting the industry and provide a forum for that conversation to take place, because we felt that was lacking. So we started off doing some smaller evening panel discussions. And then as the network kind of grew and people kind of trusted us, we started to put on the conferences. And then in 2009, we took a bit of a punt and we thought we'd do a technology and insurance conference. And we had about 30 people turn up. It's terrible. Everyone was saying, technology is never going to impact insurance. It's highly regulated. We're all different. Oh, no, it'll never happen. Anyway, we persevered with it, and that is now TINTech and TINTech London Market, which we'll talk more about later, which are pretty standard industry events now in the calendar. So we're pretty pleased that we took that punt and persevered with it. That's where we are now.
I'd like to think as well that you deserve some credit, not just for tracking the industry's innovation, but also inspiring some of it, by bringing those people together and poking them with a stick and saying, come on, you've got to actually do something with this tech.
That is interesting. And it's funny to reflect on it now and to look back on those days where we had to, drag people into the rooms almost to talk about technology. And maybe there was like a core group of not just us, but people in the industry who really believed that it's not going to, that digital isn't going to impact us. It's going to have a fundamental kind of change in the landscape. And I think once you have that core group of people, you start to build some momentum. And then as time goes on, it becomes evident and people then want to get on with it. Maybe we did play a leadership role in some of that, but, it was more luck than planning. But anyway, we are where we are.
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting in that approach and this sort of network-centric piece is this recognition that, especially with innovation and technology, like the industry has to sort of move towards those objectives like together, right? And I think the sort of Chatham House rules structure that you guys operate is a perfect environment in which people can come in, talk candidly about objectives and challenges, but in this sort of like collaborative, but they're all competitors, but they know that for the sake of the greater good, they need to sort of align on what they're trying to achieve. And it's also created quite, at times, like contentious conversations around the effectiveness of Blueprint 1 or 2. But in an environment that's actually really thought-provoking. I think it's a super, super event, that.
Yeah, I think people trust it. So we don't allow. So just for people who don't know, we don't allow any press in the audience or any transcripts to be taken or anything like that. So we're not. The purpose of the event is not to create content for a magazine, for instance, which can, especially with senior representatives on the stage, really dampen down what they're going to say. So you get some really nice insights, but I think because we have this discussion-based forum, as you were talking about, that really gets people together and interacting, I think that does generate a different feel and vibe around the event. And our kind of whole purpose, I talked about the golden rules, but that's kind of now morphed into kind of enabling positive change. So everything that we do, we kind of always come back to, is what we're doing, is this event that we're putting on going to help people enable that positive change? So we always have that kind of core North Star guiding kind of principle behind the stuff that we do. We're not just, although we are, in it for the money.
Yeah, no, it's cool though. And I think it must be quite exciting to look back over the journey you've been on. I mean, I'd love to hear what tech topics were around in 2009 when you first started. But I know you've also been, through a pandemic and gone fully virtual and back again. All sorts of things must have happened over the last 20 years of doing this.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. So if we think back to the pandemic, and you also think quite deeply about it because it's so easy to just forget that terrible time. And also you look back and you see it as a linear kind of number of rational decisions that you made. Well, actually at the time you had no idea what was going on. There were huge shifts going on in society that were rapidly happening. Information was all over the place, and it was just really difficult as just a business leader to kind of make decisions. And then you throw into the mix that we're a live events company. So what are we going to do? So I think as a team, I think that's what I always come back to. Everything that we do is around a team effort. We try and bring everybody into those big decisions. We try to get everyone involved in making those decisions. Obviously, it's me and Phil that make the final decisions as the business leaders and owners. But if we can grab those perspectives, and then we can kind of guide a path. So looking back to that pandemic, so the first decision we had to make was, is it going to be 2 or 3 months? Because remember, people were saying, listen, by September, this will all be over. That'll be fine. So a lot of companies did put people into furlough, expecting their events from the summer to kick in October, November. We thought that's the first decision we got right. We thought it was going to be a longer play than that, which turned out to be the correct call. And then once you've kind of made that decision, you go, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to furlough, or are we going to push forward? And we decided to push forward. We tried to put as much as we could online into a digital space. And what's that? The outcome of that, I suppose, is that we're now in a place where we're not just a live events company. We're a media company that has digital offering, capabilities around research and writing reports, as well as the live events. So actually putting us in that really uncomfortable place of having to do things differently, which nobody wants to do, actually drove so much innovation within us and just showed us the art of the possible, in terms of once you get a team and they're all galvanized around around a kind of a purpose, and then you put a burning platform underneath them which says, if we don't do this right, I think we might all die. Not die in the literal sense, but in business wise, then it's incredible what you can achieve, really.
If we look at sort of the market's then ambition around technology, have you seen like an acceleration of that having come out of the pandemic? I think a lot of companies sort of saw they got through it, but kind of barely. Are we seeing now, as like with the TINTech as an event specifically, sort of a resurgence of focus on technology innovation efforts and investment in these areas? What is your sort of inside perspective there?
So, in terms of the way that organizations are now thinking about technology, I would say there's been a step change in the way that they're approaching technology and what they're open to trying. So, if I look back at the first 5 years of the insurance network, we would have the event, and at the round tables there would be a core group of people that were still saying this is not going to impact us. We're a highly regulated industry. You cannot digitize the Lloyd's and London processes, all this kind of stuff. And there was a point as mobile started to take over where we kind of just went, look, this conversation's got to stop. If you are one of those naysayers, you need to leave the room now, because we have a bunch of progressive people here who want to drive this conversation forward. And I think that helped, by me saying that, this is the forum for progressive conversation, not holding the industry back. I then think that the pandemic that made the industry grab hold of digital in a way they wouldn't have done if it had all been planned, and the kind of success in inverted commas of that, so they could still trade and everything like that. When everything came back, people were more open to the possibility of, okay, it was pretty good last time around. What are the other options? And then you couple that into the kind of the world where we're at now, where we're at this kind of tipping point into data, advanced analytics, into AI, which is just supercharged over the last 12 months the conversation again, and presented a possibility that of really re-engineering everything that we do in insurance. I feel the conversation has moved a long way. I mean, there's still pockets of resistance, I would say, to change, but you're always going to have that, right? Yeah. So, but I mean, the majority of people that we have at our events, as you know, Ben coming along to them, it's about people trying to look at those challenges and what are the approaches that are going to overcome them. So, yeah, it's really interesting to kind of reflect back and look at that timeline and how things have moved forward.
Yeah, completely. I remember thinking back through TINTech's, old and young, different themes that have come up that the industry's had to sort of grapple with together. So I think my first TINTech, I would have been with Aon, looking at the topic of the Internet of Things, right, which had recently got enough currency to enter the insurance world, and everyone was like, "What do we do with this? Who funds the Internet of Things? We think we can put sensors on stuff that might have claims associated with them, but how do we organize our resources and those of third parties to make this exist?" And then you had blockchain came in a bit later, which was this whole other, Pandora's box that we opened and thought, oh, existential crisis, are we all going to be displaced? But again and again, and I think it will do again for AI, it provided a forum for people to sort of sit together honestly and say, well, how have you got on with this? We've tried this thing and we get hit with this problem, or we've started doing robotic process automation and we found it works in this isolated example, but a bit more challenging here. And I think that open conversation has really helped guide the industry towards progressive things they can do, rather than, as you say, slamming the brakes on.
Yeah, I'd agree with you to a certain extent. With the examples you pick around big data and blockchain and kind of those little peaks of, I don't call them fads, but a little bit hype that you always get with technology. That the interesting thing I think around AI, and this is my take on it, is that actually it pulls all those kind of buzzwords that we've had for the last 5 or 6 years together. And it may be the glue, I don't know, nobody knows, the glue that will pull these different data sources together to create something different. And I also think you can see it through the lens of kind of step changes in technology. So if you think back to the big changes, so you think about when the internet came along and we had the .com boom, and we all went through that as young professionals, professionals, and then we had the other step change, which was kind of mobile, and again we've been through that, and now there's a generation of leaders that are kind of my age, in their 50s, that have been through those two kind of significant evolutions of technology, and I think they're grounded in the fact that these things come in cycles. They have big impacts on organizations for a decade or a little bit longer, and you need to be able to firstly understand what they are, secondly how they're going to impact your organization, your customers, and kind of the world that you operate in, and then be able to respond to that effectively. Mm-hmm. And it might be like through being a cutting edge innovator and being the first person to come up with whatever it is in AI, in underwriting, whatever, or just a fast follower, or just actually, no, that's not for us, it's whatever. And having that kind of grounded approach to these kind of new technologies, I think is something that stands us in good stead, because we've been through them, and suddenly we're not a rabbit in their headlights and caught out by these things. So I think that's quite interesting. I think the other interesting thing I would say about AI is that it's not one thing. The AI is a discipline, and within that there are sort of fields of research and application within that. Obviously, Gen AI is getting a lot of the headlines at the moment. And the way that, like you were saying, Ben, when you see it working in a vertical and you can see the proof of concept and that works, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is kind of horizontal. So there'll be a whole bunch of AI that comes in through Microsoft 365 with Copilot, or any bunch of different applications that people use as their workflow. They will just come online and they'll start using them. And so you're not going to have this kind of, oh, this is AI in inverted commas, and we're going to apply it to our business this way. It will come in horizontally, and users will start to use Copilot and assistants and all these type of things to help them. So there's going to be this faceted approach to the development of AI, and it's going to be really interesting to see the way that it kind of comes alive in organizations, I think.
Yeah, we're sort of very rapidly approaching sort of TINTech 2024. Like, is this feeling like it's going to be one of the central topics, or what was your pre-event survey looking like? What are the sort of hot topics do you think are going to be brought up for this year's event?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because hot off the press, literally a few hours ago. So I managed to pull together the results of the survey. As you can imagine, artificial intelligence, its integration, the impact that we've just been talking about is up there, along with kind of data and analytics. The other hot topics, I would say, are Blueprint 2. Yeah. So there is still, from the findings of the research, we can say there's still quite a lot of ambiguity within the scope and timelines for both phase 1 and particularly phase 2, because that's been pushed back. So I think clarity around that, and to be fair, Valentic, Lloyd's, and that group have been doing a lot of work in outreach to put events together to try and get the message out there. But I think around the detail, I think it's going to be really interesting and very helpful for people at the conference to come along and have a session looking particularly at that. The other areas then are around digital transformation and change, and this is the other thing I wanted to talk about. So I was thinking before I came on the show about kind of this pre-event survey, and I've been running this pre-event survey now for 8 or 9 years, so I can probably go back, and what I should do is go back and look about how those trends have changed. But one thing that has consistently stayed the same, I think, when it comes to any kind of IT technology transformation initiative, it always seems to come back to the mindset and the people and the culture around change rather than the technology. The technology is the enabler and people get a handle on that and they can do it. But actually taking it and implementing it into an organization is really, really tough. And it's dynamic and changes all the time as your organization changes and the environment in which you operate. So if I was going to pull one thing out that is kind of the red line that draws all the pre-event surveys together, it would be that how do you overcome the operational challenges to deliver successful transformational change? And whether that's technology-led or something else, it makes no difference. But that is key, and a real challenge for people.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot on our show, and we talked in the news roundup for January. There's this recognition that the industry talks an enormous amount around the importance of innovation and the investments that they're making in different areas. But when you start to unpack that, you oftentimes see it's not quite what they sort of make it out to see. And I think part of the reason is, as you say, it's actually really hard to implement these things, to get it from here's something we're committing to as a business to actually our team is now actioning and behaving differently as a result. We've rolled out solutions that are helping us do things. So I think there's a delta there between the sort of ambitions of the leadership and what they're actually able to get the sort of frontline teams to do, and are they able to change the behaviors and get them to buy into that having an impact. Have you seen companies that have done that well, or are there like elements of that these are sort of triggers of success? Companies who've done this have had a greater success in implementing programs?
I think having, first off, kind of the purpose of the organization, I just really believe this, and this is becoming more and more, that the London insurance market has not paid enough attention to actually what it does and how it helps customers. And we've talked about this at TINTech, about the extended value chain and how far away customers are from people in that chain. And I think people in the past have just been lost, just going, what am I doing? Yeah. What am I doing here? Actually, not what am I doing? I'm inputting data, but why am I doing that? What is the purpose? What is the outcome of all this activity? How is it helping somebody or an organization or something? And that purpose, has to be felt across the organization from the top to the very bottom, and the other way around as well.
It's really interesting that was the answer you came out with, because I was about to ask you, having heard these themes from you, do you think that the community in the insurance market has that feeling of purpose right now? It does feel like you say at some points that we've got people who are like, oh, well, I know that I've got to do this data entry. We've got to make this better, or I know that X process or group of companies are really struggling, or we're really bad at this, aren't we? But there's not necessarily a clear, therefore we're going to go this way or that way. And how do you find it?
So that, I think, is precisely what is changing at the moment through leadership. You look at the leadership in those kind of progressive organizations, those successful organizations, and the new ones as well. You look at Mosaic and Convex and people like that. They are going out with a purpose, and they put marketing behind it. They've got a brand. You know what they're about. I'm sure if you work in those organizations, you get it all the time, and you feel it. So I think that's really changing, and it's not just because it's something nice and fluffy to do for organization. I genuinely believe if you don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it, you'll just leave, right? Yeah. You'll just leave and do something else. And so in this environment where everybody is struggling for talent, where the skills that we're going to need to compete in whatever the future landscape looks like in a much more data-driven, analytics and AI-enabled world, well, you've got to have a pretty compelling proposition to those new employees or your existing employees to keep them there. If you're going to kind of do anything, so that I think that's crept up the agenda, and as with all these other things, you can't take them in isolation. It's all these things coming together that creates the environment where something's important, something we need to do right now. So yeah, it's really interesting. And when we have these conversations at TINTech, it's so interesting when people come up and they really do share kind of, listen, I've got this problem.
Yeah.
What's everyone else doing about it? Because it can't just be me, can it?
Yeah, completely. It's funny. I think so. Cordy, our producer of the show, often says to me recently that in the future there will only be data companies and AI companies in some unknown timeline. And I guess there's probably a bit of an identity crisis there for what is an insurance company going to look like if all that matters is potentially slightly different ingredients, shall we say, to what makes an insurance company stand out. And like you say, I think you've got a few firms in the market who've come out with really strong target identities. I guess this is what we're going to be, and to some extent they're able to push off what they're not going to be as well, which is often a picture of some of their competitors.
Yeah.
But as a whole, the market's got to figure out what is that new breed of ourselves that we're building.
I think one of the challenges, there's something I was reading the other day, and it's kind of to your point, but it was the number of people who sort of talk very openly about what they don't like and where they don't like that, they don't want to look like that, they don't want it to be this way. But if you press them towards like, what will you do then instead? They don't have a response. So they're very well equipped of saying, well, that's all this legacy data, they don't have that very well. But when pressed to build an insurance company from scratch, it's actually much harder than it looks. And I know, some of those startup insurers, which had the benefit of having no legacy out of the box, some of them have hit scale so quickly that they've had no choice but to sort of procure some of those older systems just because they need something that works by to handle the sort of scale that they're hitting so fast. The ambition to sort of roll off of those things, but I think it's much easier said than done. And it's very easy to say, as you sort of alluded to, well, we're not going to be like our competitors who have all of these problems, because in that ambition, I think, is valid, but I think it's really hard, especially as you've alluded to as well, Jeremy, around the sort of regulatory environments and similar of, we actually can't get away from doing this right now. We need to have something that helps us file regulatory reporting and all of these elements, right? So it's tough to build an insurance company, I think.
It is. I think what you're talking about there is kind of the technology upon which you are kind of running that organization. And I agree with you that we are operating in a regulated space. You do have to have reports. You do have to have the software that can make the grade. You've got to have that. I think for me that that is fine, but why do those organizations get to the point where they are able to scale successfully like that? And that comes down to leadership. And come back to your initial point where they say, we don't like this, but we're not sure what we want to be. That that is leadership and vision. That comes from people who don't just sit on the fence and go, oh, we want to be liked by everyone. They go, no, this is what we're about. This is how it works around here. This is what we want to do. And if we can't do it currently on our systems, then that's our ambition. And if you're the CIO, then I want you to go out and see if we can fix the challenges that you're talking about. If you're ops director, again, this is the purpose. This is where we want to get to. Maybe the technology isn't there right now, but as soon as it is, man, we want to be moving on there as quickly as possible. So that's what I think. That's what it's about.
conviction, effectively.
conviction and believing in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So,
if you were to posit, kind of to extend on Ben's question, like what does an insurer in 20 years look like?
wow.
or
That's
or,
it. Yeah,
or in an
what time? I know,
undefined
I can
time
know.
horizon, but like you're sort of seeing the ambitions you've seen over the last sort of 20 years now, sort of the way the conversation around innovation has evolved. As you said, you're sort of curating those ambitious firms, those firms that want to push the boat out, who think they can do something better. If we begin to sort of compound and have it will look more like this. What are your thoughts on what that could be?
So I don't really have a view on what a successful organization will look like, but I will come back to those core principles about purpose, leadership, conviction, and execution. That what I do think will change around the London market is kind of this kind of, I don't know, mindset. I haven't really completely thought this through, but I'm currently thinking is that you cannot build a kind of marketplace for all markets in one place.
Yeah.
So let's go back to and I was thinking about this today as I was coming in. So I grew up in the Northwest. I used to go to Preston Market on a Saturday. I used to finish work, get my money, and get off at the bus station, Preston Market, and basically you could buy anything in Preston Market. They had anything you wanted. Fruit and veg, you wanted a shirt, you could get it. You wanted records, get it. You wanted any buttons, anything. It was massive, right? I didn't shop in the market. I went to a record shop, our price records, but that's why I bought my records. I didn't want to go to the market because I really, it wasn't my bag. I would go to a shop, and that's what I wanted to do. So, taking that into where we are now, why are we trying to have a marketplace like Preston Market where you can get everything there, where you could go into, I don't know, a small, like a House of Fraser type thing that would have a kind of a certain vibe of, or certain lines of business, or basically just mini markets within, and behind that, then you'd have the right technology, you'd have the right people, you'd have a way of, you're not trying to fit square pegs into round holes. It would just kind of, that market would meet the need of that of those clients, right?
Yep.
So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I get a sense. I get a sense of what you're saying from a few people that I talked to about this. It does feel like we've organically created this Preston Market sort of version of ourselves that now it's become very important for us all to sustain in a particular version of that Preston Market that we all kind of put a lot of value on. You think back to like the London Matters report and so on, where it's like, oh no, what if the London market changes? The only way we can stop it changing is to go really big on Londonisms and technology that sorts it out and so on. But it's interesting, the question was, how do we stop it from being the London we know today? How do we stop it from not being London we know today? Sorry, rather than, well, what should we do next then? Or maybe we should, like you say, instead of a giant Preston Market, we have Preston Records and Preston Coffee and so on.
Those, for sure. Those transitions are always difficult, right? And every organization, whether it was, from like Apple that sort of carved most their product line, sort of Steve Jobs returns, like 97, 98, whether it's starting businesses like a Tesla or something where it's like, all we do is this specific thing. We're not going to try to do everything for everybody. But the benefit of that, and I think you referenced it correctly with like the London Matters report and everything else, is the more refined you are with like what your offering is, the better you're able to communicate specifically what you do for whom and why. And the more you're trying to like, we sort of do a bit of everything for everybody. Like if Preston Market had like an advert, it's very difficult to concisely articulate who you're talking to and what you're solving for them. But other sort of more specialist retailers do that exceptionally well. They know exactly the person they're looking for and the thing that the pain that person is solving by coming to their shop. And I think you're right. By us trying to be a bit of everything for everybody across the world, we look at how does London fight for a bigger share of reinsurance because we're losing that, or how do we fight for cyber as that's moving more like onshore in the US. Like maybe part of that challenge is the fact that we're so disparate in the offering, and it's so hard to clearly communicate that it's hard to sort of justify it all the time.
We used to have a really fascinating view on this. Back in the strategy team of a certain large organisation in London, where you looked at the value propositions of the London market as a whole, really, and a lot of it came down to, footfall was one that was important. Brand was another. Various things about London time zone wise and so on that make it quite a convenient place to do business. But then there were a bunch of things that were originally part of the playbook, which had been replicated everywhere else. So having really good ratings, having underwriting expertise, having a standard way of doing contracts, all this sort of thing. It was like, well, haven't they got that in Germany or in Singapore or anywhere else? And over time, it's sort of been like, oh, okay, maybe not. And you end up at the point where, okay, the only one that's still standing up here really is footfall, and the fact that there's a large number of people who are still determined for this place to continue to have lots of footfall, which gives you some really strange priorities at a group level of all these sort of participants in the market combined versus the individuals within that place who also are often parts of larger groups elsewhere, right? If you've got somebody here from big brokers' London market arm or big insurers' Lloyd's syndicate, is it does it automatically follow that their priorities should align with the herd locally in London? Lots of tough questions you must deal with. And
because you're covering both sort of syndicate Lloyd's players as well as London market companies at TINTech, isn't it?
Yeah,
and beyond.
And
beyond, yeah. So I mean, big topics.
We went deep there.
And there aren't any answers. What will happen, in my view, is that these things will evolve. I think now they've been evolving over a period of time that I think all of us can agree has been far too long. But I think the world that we live in at the moment is just moving at a pace that is, in many ways, pretty disturbing. So I was having a conversation yesterday with a software company, in the US, in New York, and I hadn't heard of them before, but they were huge in a number of jurisdictions, and they were looking to come into the UK. They were doing stuff with AI that was incredible and moving at such a pace that we were talking about the London market. He used to be a London market underwriter, and he was just saying, around this technology that we're building, kind of a hub. They were saying, a month ago, 15th of December, I would have told you that would have taken 6 to 12 months to build. Now, we're building it now, and it'll be ready in weeks, because the way that this technology can help technology companies overcome their problem. So this stuff is moving at pace, and I think will just force people. And the other thing I would say is that we are in a subscription market where quite often we're playing together, but we're competing at the same time. And I do think competition in the end will win out. You mentioned London market and the expense ratios that we're trying to get rid of in the London market, but someone will get that right, get that competitive edge, and then it'll all start to follow it. Now, in what direction that takes and where it is, that's all up in the air. So yeah, I mean, it's just a very exciting time to be in kind of tech and ops at the moment, and be in insurance. It's really, really good.
That's, I think, an excellent place to wrap up. We've got an optimistic outlook on the market. TINTech London event coming up now, so we'll have links to that in the show notes and things. People can sign up to that if they haven't already. I'm sure they all have. But thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute delight.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much. And yeah, I'll see you there.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Thanks, everyone.